on trees, trails, and urban agriculture. Um, so just a welcome to all attendees. We do ask if folks can to introduce yourself in the chat function, just so we kind of know who's here and where you're from or what your interest is, if you'd like that as well. We ask that folks stay muted during the presentation and that they ask questions in the chat if possible. We'll try to do a little bit of questions after each of our presenters this evening. But if there seems to be too many or anything, we'll wait till the end and then cover it at that point, just to make sure that all the presenters get their opportunity to talk. And then just to let everyone know, the presentation will be recorded to make available for future uses. So we're going to go ahead and start the record function now. If you don't want to be on the recording, you may want to turn your video off if you don't want that part of the recording to happen. All right. So with that, again, SAFE presents trees, trails, and urban agriculture. So just to set the stage real quickly, I kind of like to, look at kind of the global, how does this all fit in picture? And so, when we look at climate and land use, we talk an awful lot at SAFE about energy usage and transportation and gas infrastructure, et cetera. But certainly when you look at this little chart here, which I think is a fascinating graphic, agriculture, forestry, and land use is a large portion of the greenhouse gas emissions, anywhere between 18 to 25%, depending on which source you look at and what year. And certainly there's a lot of opportunities there, not only to just reduce the generation of greenhouse gases, which is what this is primarily targeting, but really to sequester greenhouse gases as well, whether that's planting and plants and trees doing carbon sequestration or regenerative farming, soil carbon sequestration, tree cover to avoid some of the heat islands that we have, trying to reduce the monoculture agriculture that we often have and introduce more variety, natives and rather than invasive, supporting pollinators and diversity. So there's a lot of different opportunities and a lot of interconnections when we think about, just generally, not just, the agriculture growing our foods, but just our own home lots and our public spaces and everything in between. So with that kind of just sets the basis for one of the reasons we wanted to have the conversation this evening. And so we're so happy to have our presenters here talk about some of the exciting things that are happening around our area. And so this evening's presenters are going to be three different topics on century trees and greening our gateway city. We'll have Bob LeBlanc and Barbara Warren talking a little bit more about the Bittersweet Brigade and some of the things that we can do about invasive species and things that we can do in some of our public spaces. Chris Burke will be talking. And then we'll also have a presentation about the Mack Park Food Farm and Salem's new urban agriculture ordinance. So lots of exciting topics this evening. I know that the mayor had wanted to join us. Is she here?
Yes, she is.
Okay, so Mayor Driscoll, would you like to further set the stage for us?
Yeah, thanks so much, Cindy, and thanks to SAFE for this convening. It's a great way to celebrate and amplify so many of the projects underway in our community, all of which have really been led by individual members who live here who saw something and said, hey, we can do it better, we can do it different, let's work together. And all of these projects are really fueled by volunteers. We've certainly tried to support these efforts at the city level, provided some seed funding, oftentimes staff assistance, but I'm so proud and pleased of the number of individuals who have expertise in our community who are willing to share it to make Salem a better place. I think we all know we need to grow as a community. We have lots of community needs, but we can grow and be resilient and kind to our environment. And these are all really good examples, both city, state, and citizen partnerships, making them really fuel and get going. So grateful for the convening, love seeing everybody on this Zoom call, and I know that it's only going to make these programs better and stronger throughout the years.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for attending. So with that, I think we'll get started, and I'll turn it over to Bob LeBlanc to talk a little bit more about the Century Tree and Greening Our Gateway program.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for SAFE for having this presentation tonight, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. I just wanted to kind of explain who I am. I'm the City of Salem Tree Warden, and just for a little background, tree wardens have been around since 1899, when the first Public Shade Tree Act was passed by the Massachusetts legislature. And part of the Public Shade Tree Act was to require all the 351 towns and cities in the state to designate a qualified tree warden. In 1913, after the Public Shade Tree Act was passed, the Mass Tree Wardens and Foresters Association formed. It was individuals that were practicing arboriculture in the towns and cities around the Commonwealth. The city of Salem was a part of the early years of this association and helped enforce the Public Shade Tree Act. As a matter of fact, in 1931, Mr. Oliver Goodell Pratt, the Salem Tree Warden, was the president of that association. And right now that association is 108 years old. So not only, the state has a great reputation for preserving the public shade trees, we were one of the first to go out and actually pass an act to protect our public shade trees. Salem has always had a public tree planting program, tree preservation measures, tree pest and disease control operations, and had people on staff who were engaged in these activities. So in 2019, Salem took the step of improving the public shade tree preservation by passing the Salem Code of Ordinance number 43. New tree ordinance did a couple of things. One, it created a 9-member board of volunteers to work with the tree warden to help advise on some of the tree-related matters around the city. 2, it extended the protection of trees in Salem that make up the urban canopy by creating a protected tree zone. So the trees referred in the Mass General Law, Chapter 87, which is the Public Shade Tree Act. It's called the setback, and it's a 20-foot zone typically behind the public right-of-way or behind the sidewalk. Today in Salem, not only will that area be considered for tree planting locations, but it will protect those trees that are growing there. There are some exceptions to the zone of tree protection, but more importantly, it multiplies the tree preservation efforts and more trees that would have been removed during a building remodel or a site development without any concerns for the benefits of those trees continuously provide to the entire neighborhood. So 2019, Salem took a big step forward, and not only do we follow the Mass General Law, Chapter 87, the Public Shade Tree Act, but now we have our own. So I kind of call it like the icing on top of the cake. So, great move by the city to do that. The fall of 2020, the Salem Tree Commission decided to initiate a tree planting program that would help commemorate the 400th anniversary for the city of Salem. The idea is to have a century tree plaque, and that plaque would be attached to the newly planted tree and designated as one of these special trees that mark the celebration of the Salem history. One of the biggest challenges of planting trees in the urban environment is adequate soil volume. Large trees need much soil as possible to gather up the needed nutrients, water, and oxygen to survive and to thrive. Trees will adapt to their environment to find these necessities. So if you look around some of the tree plantings around the city, you'll notice that the trees that are on lawn strips between the sidewalk and the street, the roots have extended all the way down the street. They'll follow that soil as far as it can go. The ideal site for a century tree is in these setback zones that are allowed for in the Mass General Law and also spoken to in the Ordinance 43 that Salem now has. These areas typically behind the sidewalk in front of the front lawns of the side lawns of properties. Trees can grow and spread out so they will attain the mature height, and the width will shade the property, the sidewalk in front of the house, and also benefit the entire neighborhood. Century trees are reviewed by the tree warden. So if I get a request, what I do is I'll go out and take a look at the site to see if it's appropriate, and we'll select a species to match the site location. Trees are planted by the city staff, designated contractors in the setback area with a designated permission slip or a form that we have put together by the Salem Tree Commission that allows the contractor or the city to enter onto the property to plant this tree. Trees are planted to the proper arboricultural specifications at the proper depth and topped with a 2-inch layer of a bark mulch to retain moisture around the tree roots. A watering bag will be provided, and the trees will come with instructions for aftercare for the first 2 years as the tree gets established. For the most part, there should be very little maintenance other than watering on a new tree. Once you plant a tree, the first 2 years, the tree's getting established. There shouldn't be any pruning that needs to be done. If it's in a high wind area, maybe you would consider staking it. I don't recommend fertilizing in the first 2 years. So pretty much watering the tree, getting the tree established in the first 2 years is the primary function when you have a new tree plant in your yard. After the 2-year period, tree warden will come back for the final inspection. The tree is now the property owner. So after the 2 years have elapsed, the tree's established itself. Tree warden will go back, take a look at the tree, make sure it's still in good health, still doing well. And at that point, it becomes the property of the homeowners. All Century trees with the Century Tree tag will be recorded and filed for future with the tree warden and the Department of Public Works. So we'll have a running list of all the Century trees that we plant between now and 2026. So I assume there'll be quite a few. They'll be numbered. The plaques are very nice. They're kind of a bronze color. It describes the tree species, and also the commemorative 400th anniversary for the city of Salem. A request for the Century tree can be accomplished using the SeeClick Fix platform on the city website or by emailing myself or DPS directly. So that's the Century Tree program that's running right now in Salem. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Bob.
Okay.
So I think Barbara Warren was also going to present a little bit more on and anything that she wanted to additionally say on the Century trees, as well as the Greening the Gateway program. And Barbara, do you want me to go ahead and start the
Please.
PowerPoint?
Please.
And hopefully it will. There it goes.
So since this is being recorded, I'm really glad that Bob spoke to this and gave a lot more information than is on this page, but this is fairly repetitive. It's from, how you would request a tree. So we'll just go on to the next one and people can look at it at their leisure. And here are links to the Century Tree at salem.com for getting a tree. And also the program is funded by donations. So there is a Salem Tree Fund, and there is the link to make a donation. You could, again, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be on your property. You can suggest another area in town and talk to the Tree Commission and to Bob. So these are just two slides on the program. Okay. And I'm here to share with you this evening. I'm Barbara Warren, the director of Salem Sound Coast Watch, and we are the outreach coordinator or coordinating this brand new program that Salem just started, Greening the Gateway City. So for over the past 5 years, the Greening Gateway City program has planted over 20,000 trees in 14 communities. And as of last August, Salem became one of a new community, one of 4. The press release just went out last week. We're just getting ready for our spring planting. I wanted to point out the partnership that developed this program, Greening Gateway Cities. And you can see it's EEA, DCR, the Department of Energy Resources, Housing and Community Development. So it's just not the urban forestry. So let's go to the next slide. How did that come about? Well, back in 2008, do you remember the Asian longhorn beetle that was discovered in Worcester? And they ended up having to take down, oops, I'm missing a 0 there. They had to take down 20,000 to 35,000 trees in Worcester to rid the area of this very, very serious invasive beetle. And then the whole community changed when the trees were gone. And people, they noticed that their energy bills were going up. And people started talking about this. And so the state got wind of that. In the meantime, Worcester Tree Initiative has planted over 30,000 new trees. And what they also found is it was really important to have a diversity of species. So the Asian longhorn beetle likes maples, and everything in the town, basically in the area that was cut down were Norway maples, which we now know are invasive, but they were all planted in the 50s. So they ended up with nothing, and now they're getting a new great diversity of trees. So next slide. So it really became an environmental and energy efficiency program. It's designed to reduce household heating and cooling energy by increasing tree canopy. And so the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, run the program, and their foresters will plant 2,400 trees in Salem. And in the planted areas, so in these 18 communities now, they are also tracking temperature, energy use, and other information. They're certainly tracking the trees and residents' response to them. Next slide. So Salem Sound Coast Watch has been promoting trees for a very long time. And the slide on the picture on the left is from our rack card about trees, and it's available at the greenscapes.org website, which is about environmentally friendly landscaping, and also on the salemsound.org site. And so we all know the importance of trees, improve water quality, reduce air temperature, absorb noise, provide food and shelter. They did a survey recently of people who had received these trees, these 20,000 trees. And the things that people rated most positively was that it improved their neighborhood in appearance and that it increased their property value. They also really liked the nature that it brought back, the birds and the wildlife. Energy was sort of lower on the totem pole, but we know, and as SAFE, it's very important that we continue to reduce our energy use. Next slide. So Salem is going to get 2,000 trees that will be planted on private property. And all you have to do is promise to water your trees for 2 years. Well, continue watering them, but those first 2 years are critical for the plants to be established. The city will also get 400 trees that will be planted on municipal property. And so Bob will be working with the foresters on that. And right now they're going to be starting, if the weather permits, I think it will this year, around mid-April, and they will be planting 40 trees, mainly focusing on Bridge Street and Lafayette for now. Next slide. So the process, I'm going to go through the process of getting a tree, but the tree is really the property resident's choice. So here you can see various trees being planted. DCR does the planting of the trees. They will come to the property. They will look where you would like a tree or trees. If your property is large enough, you can have multiple trees. They will prepare the soil and water it and plant it and educate you about how to take care of that. Okay, next slide. But there is a designated planting zone. So it's not anywhere, everywhere in Salem for these 2,400 trees. There is a targeted area called designated planting zone. And the idea is to have, they looked for a lower tree canopy areas, older housing, higher wind speeds, a larger rental population, and the designated planting zone includes environmental justice neighborhoods in Salem. And again, the middle box shows, again, their goal is to increase tree canopy in a neighborhood. And, we will find, I'm going to show you the map in a minute, that there are streets that one side of the street can have trees and the other side doesn't qualify. But their belief is that it's a neighborhood benefit, and they hope to plant 5 to 10 trees per acre, and that will benefit eventually, as the trees grow, 15 to 25 households. Next slide. So hopefully you can see the amoeba shape. It says Salem. It's that orange shape. This is the designated planting zone that was identified by the state for Salem. And the foresters are really looking at the right tree in the right place. So they have many, many species, and they will work with the property owner. If you're a renter, you can still get a tree if you have your landlord sign the request form. And I'm actually doing that at 12 Federal Street or 10 Federal, the old Belltel building. We're right across from that huge asphalt parking lot, and it is so hot when you walk outside the door. So I'll be working. The landlord said that he has to check out which trees, but he's pretty much okay with it. So we will be trying to do that. So you go to find out if you're in the planting zone to maurbancanopy.org. They've done a really nice website, lots of information, much more than I can give you in a few minutes. So please explore maurbancanopy.org. Next slide. So Darlene Millis, who is the chair of the Tree Commission, saw the designated places, and she immediately got out the ward maps and started outlining them so that we're sharing these with the city councilors. So you can see the one on the left is Ward 5, includes the Point. The one on the right is Bridge Street and some of Bridge Street, but not all of the Bridge Street neighborhood is in the zone. The places that do not have any, are not in the planting zone at all, are Ward 6, neither precinct, Ward 3, Precinct 2, and Ward 1, Precinct 1. Okay, next one. We will be doing outreach, Salem Sound Coast Watch, and this program, it doesn't end in a year. It's going to be going on until we get all these trees planted. So we'll be at the farmers market. We'll be ramping up social media. We go to the Tree Commission monthly, and we've been to the City Council and a CERC on April 28th, hoping to get to neighborhood associations. So if anybody's on the call that would like a presentation, let me know. We are working to create some Arbor Day events. The 4 schools there, Witchcraft Heights, Carlton's, Saltonstall, and Collins Middle School, are all in the planting zone. So we're just trying to make a good contact with the schools and see if we can get a tree or more planted there. If we only get one done this year, then maybe in the fall we can do some more. And then Bob is working to, we'll be planting at the Bates School. Next slide. And this is, I think, almost my last slide. We really are going to be working on social media, especially with COVID. So if there's anybody on the call that would like to help with social media, share it in your contacts, please let me know. Barbara.warren@salemsound.org. Next slide. And if you are not in a zone for getting a greening gateway city tree, the city has a parallel tree program, and you can go to See, Click, Fix and put in that you would like a tree, as Bob explained earlier. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's so exciting to see all this opportunity for new trees. When I was living on Lafayette Street, we lost most of our trees there, and it was very, very sad because they were big and huge and beautiful. And I'm convinced it was because of a gas leak that I identified that is what killed that tree in front of our house. So I'm excited to see these new trees going back into Salem because that was a beautiful entryway. So with that, we will move on to the Bittersweet Brigade with Chris Burke, and I'm going to start his slideshow up. And Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm Chris Burke, and I am speaking on behalf of an ad hoc group. Right now, we're calling ourselves the Salem Trails Committee. We jokingly call ourselves the Bittersweet Brigade in the past. We're a group that is organizing. We're trying to become more formal and form a 503c group to work with the city and any other partners to help our wooded areas and our trail areas. I became involved in the Salem Trails back in the 1990s when the Salem Woods was threatened with golf course expansion. And back then, people were really organized around wooded trails, and we had T-shirts, economists, biologists, politicians, ministers, Mayor Driscoll was the city councilor, very involved back then. And then as that threat diminished, we all just kind of faded along with the organization, and we just continued our hiking. And we had ad hoc trail projects, but we haven't been organized. But now that group plus some more people, we're seeing the need for an organized group to speak on behalf of our wooded areas. So I wanted to talk in three ways tonight. First, what's good about the wooded areas in Salem, what the threats are, and then maybe what actions we can take. So first, the good news, we're an urban city, somewhat crowded, but we have a legacy of large parks that was left to us. We have Highland Park, which is often called Salem Woods, and there's a big surrounding wooded apron around that park. Just kind of by luck, the school department owns some, National Grid owns some, the railroad owns it, and then Marblehead owns a big piece. So we have about 130 acres in Highland Park, and then maybe another 100 acres surrounding it. So that's a nice piece of wooded area. We have Forest River Conservation Area. There's trails in Mack Park, Forest River Park. There's a nice little woods in back of the Collins Middle School, about 4 acres. McCabe Marina has trails, and there's trails at Gallows Hill, and a little bit of a trail at McGlue Park. So lots of wooded areas in Salem. But every one of those areas is threatened by bittersweet, multiflora rose, buckthorn, unauthorized camping, trail making, hut building. There are a lot of threats, and realize there's no organized effort right now in Salem. I think there's a big willingness. I know on the Park and Rec, everyone there is green and wants to do something. And Mayor Driscoll, back in the day, was one of the prime movers in Salem, saving Salem Woods. So I think what we need is just advocacy and maybe a group that is willing to apply for grants and do the work, and we can make a big difference. So I had some pictures of some of the good things that are happening in our woods, what's growing there. I don't know, Cindy, if you can go on to those. Yeah, so let's see, we have baneberry on the left. The middle picture is the chokeberry. On the right, that little tree with the big leaves is our native basswood. There's growing in 5 or 6 different places in the woods. Nice tree. Next slide. On the left in our woods, we have one little section of sassafras trees. That's the leaf on the left. In the middle, we have Joe Pyeweed, cardinal flower. On the right is a little grove we have of tupelo trees in our woods. There's about 12, 14-inch diameter tupelo trees. Those are the only tupelos that I know of that grow in our woods, and they grow in a real concentrated area. Same thing with that sassafras. It's just in one little area. So if either of those areas got taken over by bittersweet, and I can tell you bittersweet is like right on their doorstep, that would wipe it out for Salem. That species would be wiped out. So it's important that we attack this bittersweet before it gets some of these trees. Next slide. All right, so here's the problem. This is bittersweet, and on the left you see Charlie Libson. I was working with him that day. There's a big, nice oak tree in back of him, and I think that we saved the crown of the tree by taking down that bittersweet, but in 5 years it will be back. The middle picture and the one on the right, those are trees that are probably by the board that have already been overcome by the bittersweet. And in those areas, we may need to restore with new native trees. In addition to like having pleasant walking trails that doesn't have this unsightly bittersweet growing on it, the importance of this is to save our native biodiversity. So You know, we know we're going to give our children a hot planet, but also and we're all working to sequester carbon and to minimize that as much as we can. The other half of that is native biodiversity. Our native bugs, caterpillars, butterflies, birds, those populations are crashing. And that's because our native plants that they need to thrive are also being killed off by this invasive species. So like an oak tree can support 300 different types of native caterpillars, but a ginkgo tree or an invasive buckthorn, they support 0 native caterpillars. This is according to Talamy, entomologist who writes about this stuff, and he kind of collates all the studies on this and is a popularizer, but very good. So he puts this stuff together for lay people like us so that we can understand the necessity of preserving our native trees. So that's what's bad in the woods. And then the next section, here's more. So this is the threat from the campers. And then the trash they leave. On the left, that's actually a nice picture. That's the little woods in back of the Collins Middle School. I hate to even tell people about it because it's such a gem. And each little pocket of woods is important. Up there in that little woods is the only place in Salem where there's a naturally growing butternut tree. It's one of the 2 populations of the eastern wahoo tree is up there. It's one of the few places in Salem where you have hawthorn trees growing. So each little bit of woods is important. And that's a nice woods. It's the back of the Broad Street playground. One of our first bittersweet projects was near the basketball court at Broad Street. The cherry trees there were being overtopped. We cut the bittersweet back, and now the crowns of all those trees are bittersweet free, and it's just much improved. All those trees would have been dead by now because they were overtopped, but we're able to save them. So next slide. So here are some of the projects. This on the left is a new project that we have this year, and anything we do, we get permission. We don't cut bittersweet on any land that we haven't talked to the owner, whether that be the Conservation Commission or the Park Commission or whomever. But there are some areas that have been so overrun by these invasives that we believe we're going to need to restore those areas with native trees and shrubs. And the community garden program has generously provided us with a space. We have about 150 seedlings coming from the New Hampshire forestry group up there. You can buy them for like $1.50 a piece. And so we're going to develop this native nursery, and then we'll ask for permission in areas where we think it's appropriate to plant, and we'll get good expertise advice. We don't want to plant anything inappropriately anywhere. You know, for me, I'm always more afraid of what you plant than what you take down. So when I was on the Park and Rec Commission, when they took a tree down, for the most part, it was for safety reasons. It would be very appropriate. But the second question is, what are you going to plant? Are you going to plant a native tree or shrub? I would always be encouraging that. Let's see. Here's a project on the left. Janie O'Leary suggested this. This was a boardwalk that ran through a boggy area in Salem Woods. We had a bridge there, it was falling apart. But anyway, the important thing she did was get the funding together. She contacted the New England Mountain Bike Association. They provided the expertise. The Park Department provided matching funds with NEMBA, and we built this boardwalk. In the middle picture that handsome crew was working at the Forest River Conservation Area on Super Bowl Sunday. The last 3 Super Bowl Sundays, we've gone out in the morning and cut bittersweet at different places. So this year we did it at the Forest River Conservation Area. And on the right is that boardwalk after it was completed. Next slide. All right, so that's it for the slides. So I believe what we need in Salem is an organized group to be available to apply for grants and provide volunteer labor and set priorities, things like that. In Swampscott, they have the Swampscott Conservancy. That's a fairly new group, about 3 years old in Marblehead. The Marblehead Conservancy has been around for a long time. And both of those are good models for what we can be doing here in Salem. And we hope by the end of the summer to have our organization up and running. But in the meantime, we're doing these projects. And if you want to join us, I left my email there. I'll answer any email and try and include you in any projects that we're doing. And that's about it. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Chris. We had a couple of questions in the chat, so I think it's probably just easiest if I ask them of you.
Great.
So Flora asks, is there a way to kill the bittersweet at the root, like depriving it of sunlight by putting a bag over the cut stump or something?
So yes, I mean, there's experts on how to deal with bittersweet. Because we're an ad hoc group, just doing these projects here and there, what we were trying to do, our goal was to save the canopy so that you can come back another day when we have funding and a group like the Conservation Civilian Corps or something like that that can really eradicate it. But that would have to be done with supervision. I think sometimes they paint the stump with a herbicide, but that's beyond our ken. We're just like volunteers. But what we were doing was really important. Like I believe we saved that line of trees at Broad Street Playground, and I believe we really saved a lot of important trees in the Forest River Conservation Area. So more work needs to be done, and to really eradicate bittersweet around the city is going to take expertise and some money.
Can I make a comment, Cindy?
Yes.
Sure.
And Chris, thanks. So this is wonderful, Chris. It really does take a concerted effort to get rid of bittersweet. And you really can save trees, like Chris was saying. If they're strangling the trees by, wrapping their vines around it, just cutting at the bottom, that will really save a tree. So if you have it in your yard or in your fence, just keep cutting it and pulling the roots. The roots are orange, and that you can remove it from your yard. So do that if you've got it in your yard, and join Chris and the rest of the volunteers to cut it out. But right now there are so many bittersweet seeds in the soil. If you open it up, you're going to have new bittersweet plants coming up. So it's something you have to do all the time. If you can keep the trees in the canopy, those seeds won't sprout. But if you clear it, you're going to have the bittersweet seeds as well.
I'm going to ask one question also, or maybe point out an item, which is to make sure that people know the difference between a bittersweet vine and a poison ivy vine, and if they're cutting them out, what to do. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit, Chris, for us?
A little bit. I'm an amateur at all this, but first of all, to distinguish them, when you have them growing up a tree, what do I want to say? A poison ivy vine will have hair on it. It'll be a very hairy looking vine, and so when they get to be a big vine on a tree, that's the way to distinguish them. The bittersweet roots, as it goes up the tree, is kind of a gray vine without hair. The other thing I would say is poison ivy is a native vine and doesn't usually pull a tree down. It doesn't get that big to pull it down. If there is a big vine on a tree, it'll usually just be one. I have seen poison ivy over top a tree, but it's pretty rare. It's not like it's not something that we have to worry about like bittersweet. And plus, if you get into the details of it and all, like a bittersweet berry does not have the fat content that a poison ivy berry has. So poison ivy has co-evolved with our birds, and our birds eat a poison ivy berry. It takes them a long way when they fly south. They eat a bittersweet berry. It's like a sugar berry, and it's not the proper food for them as they fly south. So all of these species are interrelated, and they co-evolve together, and that's why we need our native species.
Thank you so much. So moving on to the Mac Park Food Farm, do you folks want to share your own screen, or do you want me to just go through the PowerPoint here?
If it's easier, you could just share yours, the ones you have.
Sure. And again, I'll let you folks decide who goes first and how you want to introduce yourselves.
So I'll go ahead and get the presentation started, and then Matt, Pat, and Andy can join in.
All right, and is that sharing? Can you guys see it or no?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on. Fine. It opened it up in a different window, so hold on. I'm going to stop there and reshare.
There it is.
There.
Well, thank you for having us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mac Park Farm, which is by far one of my most favorite projects I've been involved with in the last year. It's a city project. It's a community farm that was built on a municipal park by a team of local farmers. And also we have a whole crew of community volunteers, most of whom come every week to help. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the team, all of whom are on this call tonight. Matt Buchanan, who's the co-owner of Homegrown Urban Abundance Gardening. He was the founder and director of the Salem Wise Green Space Garden at Palmer Cove Park. Also a Salem High School educator for over 2 decades. Pat Schultz, who is the other co-owner of Homegrown Urban Abundance Gardening. He's a certified permaculturist, local entrepreneur, former teacher, and community activist. He's also a board member of the Salem Pantry and former school committee member. We have Andy Varela, who's the owner of Maitland Mountain Farm. And I'm Carrie Murphy. I'm the health and wellness coordinator for the Salem Board of Health. I'm also a registered dietitian. And we're all members of Salem Food for All, which is Salem's Food Policy Council. So kind of the impetus for this project came from the Salem Community Food Assessment, which was published in 2018. It was basically a 2-year research project evaluating Salem's food system. And it was conducted by Salem's Food Policy Council and published by the city of Salem. And it was funded through Mass in Motion, which is a program of the Department of Public Health. So over the course of all this research, we did a number of surveys with residents, researched public health data, and also looked at North Shore Medical Center's community health assessment. And we came up with findings that informed the recommendations in the food assessment. So some of the findings that helped for this project were that 55% of the respondents to our resident food survey reported that fruits and vegetables are difficult to find near their homes. Only 12% of the respondents reported getting the recommended 5 daily servings of fruits and vegetables. 68% of the retail stores that we surveyed did not sell any fresh produce whatsoever. And those with the highest quality were outside areas that were within walking or biking distance. Salem also had one of the lowest estimated fruit and vegetable intakes from the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System survey. We have a much higher rate of food insecurity than the Massachusetts average. We're second only to Lynn, and that has only gotten worse through the pandemic. And more than half of our Salem Public School students are considered economically disadvantaged. So one of the recommendations from the Salem Community Food Assessment that we discussed with Mayor Driscoll, who was very enthusiastic about using vacant municipal land for this purpose, was to use it for growing food for the community. So after going through the recommendations and deciding this was something we were going to focus on, she recruited Matt, Pat, and Andy, our team of local agricultural experts, to look at areas in Salem and decide where would be feasible to start a project like this. Mack Park seemed like the most natural fit. It had always been a private estate. It wasn't used for industry. They did a number of soil tests throughout the park in the area where we ended up planting and showed no contamination. So we were able to plant right in the ground. But we chose this area at the bottom of the hill off Grove Street, right by the wetland. And you can see what it looked like beforehand and what it looked like at the height of our growing season last year. So this is the design of the project, which is an urban farm and soon to be community food forest. The farm, it's a working farm, so it's fenced off and locked when not in use. It's not open to the public unless we have volunteers working there. We have a number of volunteers coming to help us every week. They help with the planting, maintaining the farm, the weeding, the watering. We've also partnered with local food assistance organizations to distribute the food. And while most of the food was donated last year because there was such a need with the pandemic, we're also hoping to have some opportunities to work with local retailers to increase local food access at convenience stores and restaurants in Salem. We had weekly free farmers markets at the Mack Park Farm, as well as 3 mobile farmers markets. We got a grant to run 3 markets at low-income housing sites at Salem Heights, Rainbow Terrace, and Pequot Highlands. So you can see in the design, the food forest we planted in multiple areas around the farm. We're working on a design now for an ADA accessible path that will lead to a picnic area and an area of the food forest. And this part of the project will be completely open to the public for picking and to enjoy. So this is the timeline of the project. So you can just see how quickly it all really came together. When we started looking at different areas to plant, that was last fall. Then we all presented to the Parks and Rec Commission in October, and we received unanimous approval. November, we went before the Conservation Commission, and once we got their approval, our team actually got out there with the tractor in November and started turning the soil, planting winter rye. Then by March, we started engaging with the Mack Park Neighborhood Association and showing them the design, and they were also very enthusiastic. And by April, we were out there clearing the site with our volunteers. The pandemic did slow us down a bit. We couldn't plant until it was mid-May. And we also built the fence in the irrigation pond, as you can see in the middle picture there, right at the end. We have a small pond where we can use rainwater for irrigation, so we don't have to rely as much on the city's water supply. And then our mobile markets ran from July through September. So the impact we had last year, even despite the late start, we were able to grow over 7,000 pounds of food that was distributed directly to Salem residents. We were serving an average of 200 residents a week. The Saturday market at Mac Park alone was drawing an average of 100 residents every Saturday. We were providing recipes with the produce every week. We had about 90 volunteers of all ages, all different backgrounds who came every week, and most of them returned. And there was a big education component of this where volunteers could learn about how to grow in their own yards, learn how about organic practices, the environmental benefits of growing your own food. It was a community building experience. I think it was a time where people really wanted to come together and couldn't. So this was a safe way we could be together outside, spaced out, but still feel like we were part of something bigger. And it was also a lot of physical activity. I think all of our volunteers will attest that the labor was pretty intensive. So our plans for this year, the food forest is going to be planted this spring. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the food forest, it's planted similar to a traditional forest. It's not supposed to require much in the way of maintenance, and we're not going to use any pesticides or chemicals. They don't need as much water because of the way they're planted. They're permanent, and they provide a biodiverse habitat for birds and pollinators. They improve the health of the soil and also help with stormwater management. I don't know if any of my team members want to chime in here and talk about some of the other benefits or components of the food forest.
Sure, I'll jump in. So for one, from that earlier map, for those of you who haven't been following the process over the last year and a half or so, the food farm is the fenced area, and that's producing annual vegetables and some herbs and so forth. Relatively high production following all organic practices. The soil was tested throughout the growing area for the food forest and the farm. Turned out actually very, very clean. And then we've amended the soil with a lot of organic amendments and so forth. The water catchment is in the pond, but it's also going to come off of the structure that's being built on the other end, currently going to be a hoop house. So we should be able to sustainably water that farm area and much of the food forest this year and in upcoming years. And then in all of the patches around that, up to and abutting the wetland are the food forest areas. And so food forests are, like Carrie said, kind of designed in layers like a forest, but everything is edible. From the roots to the fruit trees, to the vining plants, to the herbs and so forth. Intermixed in all of that are going to be a bunch of perennial flowers that actually serve to all of these plants co-nourish each other in these little guilds that are built in each of the food forest patches. It's going to be highly productive, but it's going to take a while. The trees are going to have to establish, the berries are going to have to establish, some of the other stuff's going to have to establish, and then it will mature over time. And when it's ready, people are going to be able to come around every year during the growing season and gather food. We're also going to develop literature and a strong educational component too, for a couple of reasons. So people won't pick prematurely or damage anything outside of the fence, but also they'll know how the ecologies are working and working together. The whole thing was designed using permaculture / ecological design principles. And it's based on whole systems thinking, but using natural environments as your teacher. and replicating that in the form of food production, or with the, you know, with the goal of food production. It's going to be beautiful. On top of that, we have a whole perennial sunflower hill that we're planting this year. You know, herbs and flowers. We planted some annual flowers last year that were gorgeous. We're going to try to supplant those with perennials this year. And from the top of the hill, looking down onto that old softball practice field is going to be one of the most beautiful places in Salem, I think. In terms of natives and legacy trees, there is some stuff that we are growing there, such as pawpaws, sugar maple, and so forth. We considered quite a few different kinds, including trees, including butternut, and just had to make decisions because the space is limited along the way. The food forest is going to consist of an apple guild, not a grove, a guild, because they're going to be diverse plantings, you know, next to and underneath and around the apple. A cherry guild, a peach guild, a more diverse fruit tree guild with plums and apples and pears, and it's going to be great. And so far, I mean, it's just been, you know, it's been a blessed project. So many people in the community support it. So many people are volunteering. We're getting a unanimous approval from every board we come in front of. The city council unanimously approved this project or supported this project. And we hope to be able to replicate it, you know, at least some of the components across the city, because it's good for the environment. It's good for community resilience. It's good for community building. It's good for food security. And one thing that Chris Burke has mentioned in the past, not in his presentation earlier, is actually developing a map of food sources, natural growing food sources in the city of Salem, which I think would also be a wonderful idea, in conjunction maybe with some of the other maps that were alluded to today. And we'd love to, on public land and on school land, create more production spaces. Matt and I are in conversations with the Salem Public Schools right now. We're going to start slow there, but hopefully we can build up some higher, you know, organic vegetable and herb and fruit production on school land too, school land that's not, you know, currently used.
Do you want to go back to where we left off? I think it was just the next slide or two up. Yeah, so these pictures show us out there last fall turning over the soil, laying down cardboard and salt marsh hay just to get the soil ready for the food forest planting.
That's right. So permaculture, I don't know if somebody was else going to jump in. Permaculture is also referred to as regenerative agriculture. So you take land that is not really that nutrient rich, such as what that area of Mack Park was. It was just, it was really just grass. And even though the soil didn't have any toxins, it also didn't have any nutrients. And so what we're doing is we're regenerating nutrients and biological life in the soil by digging down, by amending, by doing what's in that lower picture called sheet mulching, which is just layering cardboard, compost, soil, straw, and so forth, and letting the soil just kind of cook and attract life in order to then plant stuff that will grow in it. And regenerative, just quickly, is different than sustainable. We try not to use the word sustainable because to a lot of people that implies the status quo when we're actually trying to improve ecological and environmental health. not just not make it worse.
Okay.
I-
Oh, go ahead, Andy.
I was gonna say, if you want to go to the next slide. So I guess I'll speak a little more about the food forest and the food farm. Mac Park has been a great site to do this. The biggest issue we've had is moisture retention, as Pat spoke about. There was no contaminants in the soil, but the largest issue we've had is just the tilt of the soil. It's very clayey soil, so it does not hold moisture well. So next couple of years, what we're trying to do is just add as much organic matter in as possible. And as everyone knows, these trees are going to take a couple of years to get established. So our job, which is going to be the hardest this next coming couple of weeks, is trying to figure out how to amend the soil so that these plantings are successful for the years to come.
Great, thanks, Andy. Okay, we can go to the next slide.
So
So-
I guess I can speak on this. So this is a hoop house that we're constructing. We got the first phase up last weekend. It's a 21 by 24 foot hoop house. And what this is going to do is make Mac Park a little more, let's say, sustainable as far as the seedlings, the starts coming from Mac Park right now. Most of the plantings for season extension are coming from Maitland Mountain Farm because we have the greenhouse and the capacity to do so. So what we're looking for and proposing with this house is that Mac Park will be starting its own seed starts, as well as possibly doing a seedling sale for the spring to help supplement the cost of this project. Moreover, with this, we're also going to be building a walk-in cooler so that all the vegetables and fruit that we do harvest, we'll be able to hold and distribute accordingly to Salem Food Pantry again for this season, as well as our seasonal farmers market at Mac Park. And again, this couldn't have been done without the volunteers. This has been a great opportunity for them to learn about this, and again, we couldn't do without them. So.
Okay, next slide. And as I said before, we are also partnering with food assistance organizations. And this year we've solidified our partnership with the Salem Pantry, who have done a phenomenal job throughout the pandemic getting food out to residents through all of their mobile markets and housing, schools, and also just doing deliveries right to people's homes. So they are going to start taking on the distribution. I will still do our weekly markets at Mac Park because it was just such a great community event and drew a lot of people out to the farm so they could see what we're doing. But Salem Pantry will start taking our produce to distribute it at their mobile pantries. And this slide just talks a little bit about the benefits of urban agriculture to a community. While it's certainly about healthy food access, it also has an education component, and it also builds community. We have volunteers of all ages, backgrounds, different cultures. It's a very inclusive space. And all of these people are coming and learning. Those who don't already know, we have some very experienced people who come, but the ones who aren't so experienced are learning from those who are and then taking that back home with them, which has been great. And I don't think I certainly didn't realize the amount of food that you can grow in a small space and how much that can benefit a family's food budget. Even though we have a relatively short growing season there, as Andy was saying, like having a small hoop house or cold frame at your home can extend the growing season by months. And it's also, I was looking at other research about neighborhood safety and community gardens and how just having a vegetable garden in an urban neighborhood can help with decreasing crime, pollution, and it's also great for mental health as well. Just being outside in nature and growing food from seeds. So those are just some of the benefits. And that will segue into the next discussion that we have on the next slide about what is the Salem Urban Agriculture Ordinance. So before we start talking about this, I just want to express that this is in draft form still. Nothing has been passed. It's currently being reviewed in subcommittee at City Council and will be reviewed by city department heads. But it was started by the Salem's Food Policy Council. We had a subcommittee working on it that consisted of city employees, our local farmers here on the call today, members of CERC, members from Salem's Public Schools, and just interested residents and city councilors. And we spent pretty much the past 6 months drafting this ordinance, looking at what other communities have done successfully in urban areas, and just taking the parts that we thought could really benefit Salem.
I guess, Carrie, if I could add, the great thing about the urban agriculture ordinance is, as we know, a lot of people do, grow backyard gardens here in the city of Salem. Some are hesitant to do so. What this ordinance is going to allow or help promote is that if you are truly engaged in something specific, such as agriculture on a small scale in your backyard, you will have protections upon that. So if you're engaged in, beekeeping or hens, and you're doing everything up to the ordinance, your neighbors will be educated on your intent and that you'll be protected beyond what you're doing. So that's mainly why this ordinance is great, that it really spells out what you're legally able to do and what you should be doing, because obviously food insecurity is an issue, and tackling it on a small micro scale is a great way to start.
Yeah, and I'll also add too, what we've seen in the last year with the disruptions to our food supply, and knowing this is likely to occur more often with climate change, it's going to become even more important to support innovative ways of growing food, especially in urban areas, which this ordinance will do. And it will also support backyard growers who may want to sell food in their residences who right now aren't able to do so. Does anybody have anything to add or have any questions?
I'd just like to quickly point out that as far as I can tell, anyway, there's really nothing onerous in the urban ag ordinance. It's just giving people more freedom to provide for themselves, for their neighbors, for their neighborhood, for the larger community, by growing their own food, growing it organically, learning how to to keep bees, to make honey, to have their own eggs, potentially down the road, so maybe some larger scale roof farms, which would be really kind of cool. I mean, urban agriculture across the globe right now is progressing at breakneck speed. If you can get your food locally, and this is hyper local, it prevents the transport of really poor quality fruits and vegetables from across the nation. You end up actually sequestering CO2, in your own yard. You contribute to the larger kind of viability of the ecology you're actually living within. And you can also make a couple of bucks, if you want. People aren't going to get rich doing this. And I can't imagine it's going to be this competitive, kind of little fruit and veggie mall in every on every street, you know, I think it's going to draw people together in neighborhoods. People are going to meet each other, you know, on the person's front yard who might be selling from their backyard. There are also options to in maybe some common spaces in neighborhoods to gather together on a day of the week or whatever, and kind of show off what you've done, and to sell it. I mean, it's all healthy. It's all healthy stuff. People become more self-reliant, and it builds community in the process. There's some concern that's you know, there are going to be some precedents that are set. They're going to break down the walls of appropriateness in terms of what can be sold in neighborhoods and all of that, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, this is urban agriculture. This is an urban agricultural ordinance. People are just selling food potentially. I mean, most people in the community who take advantage of the protections this ordinance provides are not going to be doing any selling whatsoever. It's for the occasional person who might want to supplement their income by selling the fruits and vegetables that they grow. It's not going to then open the door for, you know, having every other sort of industry, if you will, be able to sell their wares on their driveways or on their front lawns. That is the most strident concern we've heard so far, and it just doesn't hold up. So, you know, we hope the community supports this, and I mean, we can do a lot with this as a foundation to create kind of a more ecological community in Salem.
Yeah, and I'll just add to, you know, this prioritizes food production, and it's limited just to whole, uncut produce, honey, and eggs. And I did speak with some other communities who've passed similar ordinances and just asked, you know, did you experience any complaints or issues? And I talked with someone from Somerville, which is a much more population dense city than Salem, and they passed this like about 10 years ago. She said all the predictions of farm stands littering sidewalks never came to fruition. They have not had one single complaint in the last 10 years. So I'm confident that this will be nothing but a benefit to the city.
So what's the next step on this, or what do you need from any of the folks that are attending here this evening? Go ahead, Pat.
Me. So it's in subcommittee right now. And so just for community members in support, to reach out to their ward counselor and to counselors at large, to the mayor, to their neighbors, and just offer support for the ordinance. Be careful to you know, read this fact sheet. It's also available online, and to kind of engage in the process of getting this passed. I mean, it's you know, I think most people think of it actually quite favorably. So I you know, I don't anticipate that this is going to be a slog or a struggle, but you never know. So the more community support we have, or the more vocal community support we have, obviously the easier it will be for this to become reality. And again, there's really nothing radical in it. I mean, these are, you know, it reflects the way communities have existed for centuries and centuries and centuries in the past.
All right, thank you. Hold on a second. So it says that, oh, okay, so it's Jeff and Pat. So Pat, you can go ahead, and then I'll unmute Jeff as well.
I just wanted to thank all of you for presenting every project. These 3 projects are so exciting. that when we talked about what we would do for this program, we were torn in different directions. I want to talk about advocacy for a second and say that thanks to Jeff Cohen, Vice Chair of CERC, who's been very good about reminding me and other folks in SAFE to go online to the discussions at the City Council about the food ordinance that I think, you know, I've been there twice to speak in favor of this and to say how much I really love Mac Park Food Farm. And there's never been more than 3 or 4 of us who show up, although I totally agree with what Patrick said and what others have said. Whenever you talk to anybody in Salem, they are like, Mac Park Food Farm, what a great idea, what a great thing. And I put in the chat, when I want to put a smile on my face, I go to Mac Park Food Farm and look at it. It's just beautiful. And what it says about our community is another intangible, huge plus for all of us. It shows that we care. We want things to be beautiful. We want those among us who are the most in need of food to be able to get it free. I mean, at first I was kind of skeptical and I thought, oh, they're giving away food free. People are going to show up, load up their car, and then there won't be more for everybody else. And that's certainly not true. So I would just say that I hope that folks from Mac Park Food Farm will remind us in SAFE to get folks out to whatever city council meetings are, even in the subcommittees, are discussing Mac Park Food Farm. And don't just tell Cindy and me and Jeff Cohen that you love this idea. Go and tell the whole of the city council and your ward councilor that you love this idea and you want to support it. So thanks. Let's be there at the next city council meeting.
Great. Jeff, did you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm grateful that I'm representing CERC with this team. I've learned more from this team about what we can do together. I want to emphasize or reinforce something that Pat was talking about, Pat Schultz, and that is, and Kerry, as a matter of fact, we have learned so much from the pandemic about how we can locally, in a small community, help each other. And I don't think people realize how much we can sequester carbon through the tree programs and people having, farms in their backyard. But this ordinance is not just about, growing vegetables. It addresses bees and chickens, and we really have a deficiency in Salem, as most of the North Shore, and we can do things on this scale where many more people can be encouraged to do something. Just because you have an ordinance that enables people to sell doesn't mean that everyone has to do it. My feeling is the real benefit is how many more people will participate in making their property something that's helpful for the community and for their families.
Great. Are there any other questions? I know there's a couple of conversations in the chat, but I want to open it up to any questions. Any further questions? All right, so I know there's been a conversation going on, just to share with folks that might be on the video, regarding composting at the Mac Park location. And it sounds like there is an opportunity to bring compost to the Black Earth composting that's located near there, but it potentially might not be open in the winter months. So that was a question mark. I don't know if anybody can further answer that question or not. But certainly this group has been a large supporter of the composting program in general. And I love that Salem's got a few drop-off locations as well for folks. But I think any expansion of the compost program, most of the folks on this call would be interested in and welcome. So that would be great. I really wanted to just say that I'm just overly impressed with the amount of food that you folks are producing at that location. You can tell that you have some real professionals on your team, which is wonderful. And just say that, just in closing, that, certainly each of these programs brings a different but cohesive kind of piece of the puzzle together, right? Planting new trees with the century trees and the greening our city, gateway city is great. Saving our older trees. A lot of folks think of planting trees when they think of carbon sequestration, but the reality is that as they've been doing more research, what I've heard anyway, is that larger trees actually continue to sequester more and more each year than the smaller trees as they grow, which most people didn't naturally assume. And then, producing food locally, allowing for more natural growth, allowing for less transport of the food, and all of the things that brings together, just, kind of just, like I said, just puts all the pieces together. So I really appreciate all of our speakers this evening and all of our attendees. And with that, I will close the meeting. Typically, our upcoming meetings are the first Thursday of every month, but we are to be announced for next month. And Pat has something additional to say. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I saw a question. Will there be a recording of this webinar? Yes, it is recorded, and we'll send out we'll post it on the SAFE Facebook page, what the YouTube address is to access the recording of this meeting. And we'll also send it out to the SAFE listserv. If you're not on the SAFE listserv and you would like to be, please put your address in the chat or email us at salemsafe@gmail.com, and we'll be glad to add you to the list. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Pat, for
Thank
putting it
you.
together.
Thank you all.
Thank you.